Hey everyone, thanks for participating of this conference, the DevSecOps 2024 from Conf42. And today I'm gonna talk a little bit about the improvement of DevOps workflows with generative AI. So a little bit about me. I am Julio Arruda, the AI Impact Lead at GFT Technologies, leading a global product focused in a developer productivity using generative AI. Okay. I am an 18 years Microsoft MVP focused on DevOps areas, talking about Azure DevOps, talking about GitHub, Kubernetes, productivity, career, and other contents like that. I'm a part of the GitHub Start program too, and I'm the first one from Brazil. And I'm more recently, I'm a part of the Docker Captain program as well, okay? I'm a speaker in technical conference like that. I'm a YouTuber about DevOps, about career, about productivity, about GenAI, okay? You can find here the link for my YouTube channel, youtube.com/@JulioArruda. You can find here my LinkedIn as well and my mail if you need to talk about some content about this presentation or about something else about my contents, okay? So to start this talk, I think that's an important point that we can explain or define here is what is the generative AI. Basically, this is an approach that you can use to generate a new content, such as a text, images, music, or in our case, source code documentation, or unit testing, for example. I'm talking that it's because we already have a lot of contents and materials and usable AI tools, AI frameworks, AI algorithms to provide us many different tasks. And we are already using artificial intelligence for many years for different tasks like classification information or training to support us, to providing data classification, to provide us tools like a chat bots as well. We can do a lot of things with artificial intelligence from years ago, but the generative AI provides us easy way to interact with the artificial intelligence. That's before the generative AI, to work with artificial intelligence was very hard and complex to do because we need to know too much about the complex algorithms, about data classifications, we need to have so many hard skills to work with artificial intelligence. But with generative AI, all of us can interact and use the artificial intelligence. The ChatGPT transformed the scenario with the easy way to interact. Basically, I can ask something and generative AI will be generate a good answer to me. Basically, this new approach changed everything. It's not only for software development lifecycle, but for all areas that you can imagine here, okay? And to working with this generative AI, a new thing appeared that it's a prompt engineering. And what is this properly? Basically, this is an art of crafting effective instruction to get best response from AI models. I'm talking here that's an art because we don't have exactly point or exactly tutorial about how can you create your best prompt, because we have techniques, we have a lot of techniques of that. But imagine that if I'm telling you to create a new prompting, for example, answer to me about the vulnerability in the code and show me the SQL injection or other points in the code. You probably have one specific result, and if I try to do the same, the result will be so different, will be big different. Basically, the prompt engineering is an art because you need to improve your prompt, to create your prompt with your own ideas. I cannot tell you using this specific word, using this, using that. You need to try to create something, to imagine the results, to test and test again, improve and improve it again, because it's not a fixed point about the creation. This, if you change one thing, one small thing, if you include a comma in your prompt, your answer can be changed and entirely changed, okay? Basically, you need to think about that, to study about that. We have a lot of techniques. We have a different kind of prompting, like a chain of thoughts or one-shot promptings. We have a different kind of this, but the creation of this prompt is not a exacting point. It's basically an art to creating this. And we can see here the difference of these prompts. I put this in a PPT, but I can show you directly in my VS Code. Let me open here. For example, let me try my first prompting that I'm using in this demo. Basically, I'm requesting for GitHub Copilot that building an application to display electrical vehicle data. And I'm requesting to give some options for how can I structure this app. Okay, I will send this for Copilot, and I will be received from this a good information. I will be receiving here different options about what I can do this. For example, an MVC architecture, an MVVM, microservices architecture, component-based architecture, serverless architecture, monolithic architecture, and here I have one example. It's a good result, yes, but it's not properly that I need, because I have a lot of options here. But imagine that if I provide more information, more context for the Copilot. Let me clear my chat here, and let me using my second version of the same prompting here. In this version of this prompting, I request the same thing. I'm building an application to display electric vehicle data, but I'm including more information here. For example, I want to use Express and TypeScript. Give me some options for how to structure this app. I'm informed that's a large-scale project with more than 1,000 users online. For authentication, I'm using Keycloak. For front-end, we'll be creating TypeScript, and the application will be deployed on Azure Kubernetes Service, for example. Let me send this for my GitHub Copilot. And now we can see that the information is a little different. For example, I have here a project structure, a key components, information about Keycloak integration, and for example here, source codes to implement my Keycloak integration, to implement my route for vehicle data. Basically, I have more detailed, more examples about what I can do here. And for example, the container code to generate my Kubernetes implementation. Basically, the point here is, if you provide more information, more details about your request, if you provide more context or how many details you provide in this, you will be receive best information possible. All the time when you need to use a GenAI tool like a ChatGPT, Google Gemini, or GitHub Copilot in this case, the important point is providing more context, be clear about your request to receive the good answers. Basically, good things in the prompting, good things out in the answer. Okay, basically is that what happened here, and it's basically what happening in all tools that you are using, all generative AI tools that you are using, or in the tool GenAI tool that you can develop in the future. Basically, the idea is the same. Context is important, the prompt is important, and how many details you provide is very important, okay? And only to understand how this prompting works on GitHub Copilot, but not only on GitHub Copilot, the idea of this will be the same in other GenAI tools like a ChatGPT, or in the tool that you can be developing using GenAI. Okay, the structure will be something like that with the necessary changes, like you are using other techniques to interact with generative AI, but the core is that the user will be making a request for your tool, in this case GitHub Copilot, for example, to create a web server in TypeScript. The GitHub Copilot will be understanding this and append a system prompting. What is this? The idea of the system prompting basically is a set of rules that you providing for your assistant, for your GenAI tool. In this case, for example, the GitHub Copilot have 2 lines in the beginning here. You are a friendly code assistant and probably have something like you need to answer the question about source code only. You need to guarantee that you are not implementing vulnerabilities in the code, and you need to talk only about the code without and you do not have answers, I don't know, for prolifics or other contents without source code development. Using the system tag with this set of rules, your GenAI will be follow these rules to answer only the necessary information. For example, if I try to ask about for Copilot about prolifics, for example, the GitHub Copilot will be answer for me something like I was not able to answer about that. Okay, the idea is that of the system area in the prompt. Basically now, I'm sending to GenAI the user section, create a web server script, and a system area with the set of rules from GitHub Copilot or from ChatGPT or from your tool, okay? And I send the both information for GenAI like GPT-4 or Claude 3.5 Sonnet or Google Gemini Pro. It don't matter. I send this for my GenAI, and GenAI will be understand, okay, I have this rules, I have this answer, and now I have this rule, I read this question, and now I need to answer this question. Basically now I have a new section called assistant with the answer from GenAI that responds for your tool and your tool response for the user. Basically is that the workflow about the prompting on GitHub Copilot or another GenAI tool, okay? I'm talking about this, but you probably asking for why we use GenAI in the SDLC. And I have here these 4 key points, but we can include other because we have a lot of benefits to using GenAI in a DevOps workflow. But these 4 key points are the most important for now for me, okay? The first one is the enhanced developer experience, because when I start to work as a software developer, I learned that the user experience is a most important part of software development, because if the user don't like the user experience, the user will not use your application anymore. But yes, it's important, but the other part is important as well. The developer part, it's very important, because if the developer have a good experience in the source code creation, the product creation, we will have best results for the final user, not only in the user experience, but we have a good backend, a good source code, an improvement in the usability, in the higher viability of the application. We can have a lot of benefits if you're focused in a developer experience, okay? GenAI will be solving all points of the developer experience. No, it's not the idea, but it's an interesting point to start in this if you don't have a developer experience implemented in your process yet, okay? Only about developer experience, you can have another talk about that, because we have a lot of contents for this, but for now, keep in mind that a GenAI can be support you on this to start to improve this. But why? Because going to the second point, it's increase the productivity, because the GenAI tools enables the developers to work more smarter. Because we have, for example, GitHub Copilot, a code assistant directly in my IDE. In this case, I do not need to go anymore for forums on the internet or to Google to understand how can I solve a problem. I remember in the past, before GitHub Copilot, I spent more time looking in the internet, looking in the forums, how to solve specific problems in my source code, in my tasks, because some errors happens and I have no idea why, or I need to specific implementation that I have no idea how can I do, and I need to make a lot of researches this spend time, a precious time that you have in the projects. And now with GitHub Copilot, I can use this to support me on this part, because GitHub Copilot already suggests implementation to me based in what I'm writing in my code. For example, if I'm writing here a switch case, the GitHub Copilot already suggests me how can I complete the section. I can use the Copilot to suggest to me improvements in this code. Or for example, if I don't remember, I don't know, how can I do a SQL insert in a SQL language on Oracle database, because I don't use Oracle database so much here. I don't need to go to Google anymore. I can only ask for my chatbot in my IDE, and in a seconds, I have now an implementation, an explanation if necessary, and the implementation will follow my code standards that I'm already creating for. It's a very interesting point, okay? And it's providing so many productivity for us. And going for the third point, it's providing us increased learning, because it's supporting me to understanding more about my project. And not only about that, but imagine if you are starting in a new project that you have no idea what this project does. You need to see the documentation, right? Yeah, but we have a point here. It's very common that projects don't have documentations, right? Or if have documentations, the documentation is very outdated. And basically you need to check with other teammates how this project works, what this project does, to understand what happened here. And you need to spend time for other team members for this. Using generative AI like a GitHub Copilot or other tools like a Chief AI Impact that I'm working for, you can increase this, because we can, for example, generate the documentation about the project using generative AI, having this documentation alive day by day, for example, or week by week. It's no matter for now, but you can have a live documentation properly. Or you can use a GitHub Copilot, for example, to explain in a real time for you what the project does, what this class does, and it will be increase your learning. But the increased learning is not only about your project, but you can increase the learning about other points, about a new language, for example. If you have no idea what another language does, or how can you start to program in another language, you can use a generative AI tool to support you on this. For this specific point, I have a personal example. A month ago, I needed to create here in my project a new VS Code extension in TypeScript, but I never wrote a code in TypeScript before. This was my first contact with TypeScript, and I used a GitHub Copilot to supporting me to explain more about TypeScript, to supporting me to create a Hello World project on TypeScript, to try to understand a little bit more, to create more complex process. And I'm using GitHub Copilot to supporting me to create this extension as well. And I had a very good experience on that, because I created this extension. It's not so complex extension, but have a good complexity. But I created this in 2 days, a new functional VS Code extension. And I had no knowledge before. Now, I'm not a specialist on TypeScript, but I have more knowledge on TypeScript. I know how can I write a code, understand the problems, improve the code, but I had no knowledge before. I used only GitHub Copilot to teaching me how can I do that, supporting me in the implementation. And in 2 days, I implemented a new feature with the things that I had no knowledge before. It's a very important, and it's a very interesting about the powers of the GenAI tools in the developer's productivity. And going to the end of these key points, we can focus on the business properly, because we don't have to looking for about common things, if and else, switch and case, or other simple parts of the software development that you cannot remember day by day, and you need to go to Google to search about this, because this will already provide us this information, and you can focus to improve the application, to understand the business rules, to improve the best ways of these business rules, to create the best implementation for all, to have the best application for our users. Okay? Basically, this is 4 key points that you can understand about why you can use GenAI on SDLC. Okay? And how can GenAI tools improve the DevOps workflows for us? We can have here a lot of points. I set in here 6. The first one is the code creation. It's the most common for all of you. Probably you are already using a GitHub Copilot or Amazon Q or other code assistant in your IDE. And it can provide us, as I mentioned before, a lot of suggestion, a lot of improvement, support us in so many tasks here. It's a very interesting, and I'm using this a lot, and it's amazing. The second one is the code reviewer process, because we know that the developers was not providing information for us. But if you don't know what I'm talking here, the code reviewing process basically is when a developer made a new change in the source code and need to request that this change is merged in a production version of the application. Basically, the developer had a new task, worked on this, create a new source code implementation, and need to merge this code. The idea of this process is that developer create a good description about the changes that he made to support the approval, to understand everything happened here and decide if this change can be approved or nothing, or if this change need to be improved before this merge happens. But we know that the developers do not wrote this explanation properly in general, or developers wrote no information or update the code, and it's provide no information for us. Okay, and following this, the approval need to go to the source code, read line by line to understand what's code happening, or call for the developer to request developers to explain the changes, and it's spend a lot of time to do this. Using generative AI tools like a GenAI Impact, for example, or GitHub Copilot or other tool for that, the GenAI is supporting you to understanding the change and explain everything for you. Basically, can generate a good description with a lot of details change by change, implementation suggestion. We can do much more with GenAI tool in a code review, making the approval job easier. Okay. The next one here is documentation. I already mentioned before, because in general, the projects have two scenarios. It's the most common, or the project don't have documentation, and it's a problem that we know that, because no one have any idea about what the project does. If the creators go out of the company, no one will have a knowledge about that. Or in general, we have a documentation, but this documentation was created in the first version of the application, the first implementation, and it's very, very outdated. In both cases, we basically have no documentation for the projects. Yeah. But using GenAI tools, GenAI Impact as well, you can have an alive documentation, because we can use a GenAI tool to scan your source codes automatically, understanding the source code and creating a new markdown documentation, for example, a new PDF documentation or in another format documentation, and store this in your documentation repository to support your developers to understanding what happened here, to support your future developers to understand what happened here. And you can use this to generate documentation change by change. If the code changes, the documentation changes too, and maintain real life. It's a growth improvement in our process. Another point that we can do here is a test generation. For example, we can use a unit test to support us in a unit test creation, following your standards, your company standards. You can use this to generate functional testing, for example, using natural language. In general, you need to create a functional testing mapping HTML fields, pass some informations, making this process a little bit difficult, because if the front-end developers change everything, change a component, your test will be broken. But you can use here tools with generative AI to write your tests in natural language, for example, requesting only to make a login in a specific page with specific username and password, and the GenAI tool will be identify, for example, your fields and components on your screen, and you don't need to care with how the field's call is named for, because the GenAI tool will be identify this for you and create this automatically. The other point that I can mention here is the code correction, because we can use generative AI to understanding what's wrong with in your source code, or vulnerabilities in your source code, or bugs in your source code, and request for GenAI to support us to improve, to correct this implementation. And we can do manually with chatbot tools or automatically with batch tools like a GitHub code correct, GFTI impact code fixer as well. But we can do much more on this. I put these only 5 points here, but you can improve in this to support your creation DevOps workflows properly, to support you to create a Kubernetes scripts properly, for example, or supporting you in a modernization process, for example, from an ODS language for a newest one, from, I don't know, from COBOL to Java, or to Java 8 to Java 21, from C# 3.5 to C# 8, for example. You can use this for a lot of tasks. And day by day, new tools and new ideas is appearing to support us on this improvements. And it's very interesting and very amazing for us. And today, I'm using these two tools. The first one is the GitHub Copilot. In general, I'm using GitHub Copilot to support my things to write code, the VS Code extension, and here with the chatbot experience, but I'm using the other parts of the GitHub Copilot too, because GitHub Copilot today have so many implementations. Like another one that I like too much is GitHub Copilot Workspace. It's a very interesting implementation. And the next one that I'm using is the GFTI Impact. I'm working in this tool. I'm one of the creators of this tool on GFT, and the focus here is improve the software development lifecycle with generative AI, focused on productivity again, integrating this in a pipeline if it's possible, but have a user experience to support other tasks like user story creation, documentation creation, creating unit testing, reviewing, code review and code correction tests. We have so many tasks here. And I'd like to show a little bit about both of them today, okay? To support you to understand how can GenAI can be supporting us in a software development lifecycle, in a DevOps workflows process, okay? I have here two demos. The first one, it's more simple because it will be executed directly in my IDE, okay? And what I will be do here? Basically, I received here this scenario. I'm working in a new project that I have no much information, and I need to solve a vulnerability reported by my SaaS tool, document the code, and create a unit test here, okay? Basically, I received these informations from my SaaS tool that I have a SQL injection. What I can do here, let me open my VS Code here in this project. Let me check only I'm still connected on my, okay. I have connection with my GFTI Impact. And here I have my GitHub Copilot assistant here. And the file with the vulnerability mentioned in my PPT, for example, here. If I'm back here on my PPT, I have here the information is the user.java, and I have here this SQL injection. And what I can do here, basically, I can request to GitHub Copilot to explain me the code. And the GitHub Copilot is explaining about this class, what this class does, and supporting me to understanding this easier. But I need to solve this SQL injection, and what I can do here. I will be request, for example, for my GitHub Copilot to have factor this code and correct the SQL injection. Let me see what happened here. Now, the GitHub Copilot will be understanding here my request and basically is generating to me refactored code. And if we see here, the SQL injection solved it for me. And this is explaining for us what the change was made here. Basically replaced the statement with prepared statement, added a finally here, moved the return, and I can copy this, for example, and paste on this to have a new implementation. And I have here a correct version of the source code. An interesting point that we can do here is using a different LLMs. I have here Claude 3.5 Sonnet, O1 Mini, O1 Preview as well. And we can use all of them to generate our answers if it's necessary. But I already generate here with Copilot my new implementation. And now my request is generate documentation and generate unit tests. How can I do that? Basically, if I'm going here in my file explorer now, I already have my GFT Impact extension installed here, and I can click in the file and request to create the documentation. And here I can choose the prompts because I have a different prompts on AI Impact. I need to choose the source code language to have the standards and the LLM that my GFT Impact is supporting today. We support the 3 principal clouds with AWS with Claude 3.5 Sonnet, Gemini, and GPT-4o. Okay, I will be using AWS Cloud. And we need to wait now the documentation process, but for now, the AI Impact is understanding the code and applying a lot of convention and standards to generate a very good and detailed documentation for us. Okay, and the process generates a new markdown document for us like that. I will be open my markdown preview to see better here. And okay, now I have here a documentation with overview, process flow, insights, dependencies, data manipulation. We have here important information about this person, but yes, we already have a new document here. Now, to finish, you need to create a unit test. Let me right-click again, create unit test for this class. And again, I need to choose my prompting. I need to choose my frameworks, the source code language, the LLM. And here, the Impact is asking to me if I like to include an existing test file. For example, if I try to create unit tests for a new class like that, I cannot include, I do not include existing test files, but if I already have unit tests for this, I can put yes and point in this file to use extra context, and the Impact will be improve or correct the unit tests for us. Okay, basically now the process is working for, and the Impact will be understanding the source code class for you. And we are applying internally a lot of standards, best practices to create the unit tests for us. And we already have here the unit tests. We have here the imports, the user test class with mock-u, and a lot of unit tests to support this current implementation for us, okay? Now, following this idea, we already have the demo 1 implemented. Great. We used GitHub Copilot and AI Impact inside the developer IDE to increase the productivity, explain the project, support the code in the code correction, documenting the code, and creating unit tests, okay? We open a presentation models, changed AI. And in the second demo, we have a lot of, a little different process. I need here the same scenario, but we need to run this directly in a pull request, because the idea of this, let me copy the corrected file. The idea of this project, this process now is do the same job that the developer does. I'll be creating a new change, submit this change, and waiting for approval. And basically, I will be open my source code file here in my repository, be open the user.java, edit this file, and I will be paste my corrected version of the code, commit this, create a new branch, and create a new pull request here. When I create the pull request, I'm using here a GitHub in this case, but you can use Azure DevOps, GitLab, Bitbucket, or other DevOps tool. It's not important. It's important that this DevOps tool can be trigger a new pipeline when this pull request is created like that. Basically, if you see here, the GitHub actions was triggered a new pipeline, and this pipeline is triggering the GFTI impact. And what will be happening here? Basically, I'm creating a smart pull request process that I'm calling internally because I'm using different tools from AI Impact to supporting the pull request, to improve the pull request. For example, we saw in the IDE that I can create a documentation and create a unit test with the AI Impact. And I mentioned for you before that you can use GenAI to analyze the change to generate a code review. What I'm doing here, when the developer creates a new change, submit a new change, we know that the documentation will be outdated, and in general, the developers do not create unit tests properly or forget to create a part of the unit test. Do not create implementation, all implementation as possible. In this smart pull request included in my action process, a calling for AI Impact to run the unit test creation, to create a unit test for this, a document creation to create a new documentation, and after that review this pull request. If you can see here, I already have unit test generated, documents generated, and if I click on files changed, I can see here in the first file, the user.java, the file that I changed, okay, my changes. I have here the user test.java. The red section is the existing tests, and the red is the changed tests because I changed the implementation. The Impact understood that I need to change the test class, and you can see here what happens. Some tests was removed, other tests was be included or improved, okay? And in the final of that, I included a new documentation in Markdown. Let me open in a display rich diff, it's be easier to see. But I have here a new documentation with an overview, process flow like we saw in the VS Code IDE with insights, dependencies, data manipulation, and here a vulnerability section because we have a lot of vulnerabilities in the source code. I do not solve all of them. I can do, but I didn't this. But I can see here password storage, exception handling, providing new information about that. And if I'm back in here to my pull request description, I have now the revision created by GFTI Impact bots, providing us a general description about the changes here. For example, to this implementation improve security and code quality, include changes. And here I have summary file by file, explaining the changes in the class that I manually does, and in the user test.java that AI Impact does, and user.java that is the documented included AI Impact in the process. Here we have recommendations for this pull request related with this change, okay? It's not a generic recommendation, it's a specific recommendation. And we have here an explanation of vulnerabilities if necessary, okay, with examples if necessary. Okay, basically we are using the generative AI to improve our process, to improve our productivity day by day here, to improve the developer experience, because now I can support the developers to do the tasks more easier. For example, with the reviewing processing, supporting the description generation with a lot of details, to support the test creation automatically, to create documentation automatically, or using the IDE to creating this directly in your developer environment. We can do a lot of different tasks in different places here, but it's provide us so many productivity here. I'm using this both tools, GitHub Copilot and AI, impacting my days, and it's very interesting to me. I'm getting a lot of productivity. I was talking with my boss recently that I'm using a lot the GenAI tools like a GitHub Copilot, and Microsoft probably is boring with me because I spent more money than the license provided in general for GitHub Copilot, because I use it really a lot. I gain a lot of productivity using these GenAI tools, okay? Thanks for participating for this talk. I think that can be help you to have more ideas, to have more insights about that. If you need to discuss about the GitHub Copilot or GFT Impact, please send me an email or look about me in LinkedIn and send me a message. If you need to know more about DevOps, Azure DevOps, career, GenAI, productivity, follow me on my YouTube channel, okay? Most part of my content is in Brazilian Portuguese, but I have so many videos in English as well, okay? Again, thanks for participating. Don't forget to follow me in my social networks. I hope to see you again in next sessions, in next conference. Thank you and bye-bye.